Hello, my dear friends. You're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 11th of July of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the most important topic about air defense system for Ukraine. Ukrainians currently suffer huge problems. For example, this is once again a map of Russian roads of attacks that took place yesterday on the 10th of July of 2025. And in this picture, we can see dozens or hundreds of lines of yellow color that were attacking mainly the city of Kyiv. And we are talking about drones. Also, the Russians attacked yesterday the city of Kyiv with ballistic missiles and with the cruise missiles. Ukrainians suffered huge losses yesterday, and of course now they're trying to find a solution how to secure the sky above Ukraine, because we understand that currently Ukraine can't do it by itself. And obviously everybody in the world understands that there are just two countries that can resolve the issue of air defense of Ukraine. The first country is the Russian Federation, if they stop attacking the territory of Ukraine, and the second country is the United States of America. But Donald Trump doesn't want to give Ukrainians Patriot systems for nothing, for free. And most likely today he found a solution. In an interview with NBC, Donald Trump stated that the United States will supply Ukraine with Patriot systems through NATO, and NATO will cover 100% of the costs for these deliveries, which means that Trump will sell these Patriot systems to NATO, and then NATO will decide whether to sell the same systems to Zelensky or to give these systems to Zelensky for free. Anyway, Trump will make lots of money, and it's just a business, as it was stated by the Russian sources and the Russian authorities. But this situation, these air defense systems through NATO will resolve this air defense issue for Ukraine probably in a month, maybe in 2 weeks, maybe in 2 months, but not now, not today, not this Friday or tomorrow's or the next Saturday. And Zelensky and Trump need to make something very fast. And once again, most likely Trump found a solution. Trump's special representative Keith Kellogg will arrive in Ukraine on Monday, where he will spend a whole week talking with Zelensky. But according to my understanding of the situation, because of the fact that Patriot system is very expensive, he decided to use much more cheaper air defense system by the name of Keith Kellogg. Basically, Keith Kellogg is going to be an air defense system for Ukraine. He will replace these systems at least for 1 week, because we understand that most likely the Russians will not attack the city of Kyiv due to the protection of this Keith Kellogg air defense system. So the Russians don't want to ruin relations with the United States of America, so at least the next week the Russians will attack the entire territory of Ukraine, but not the city of Kyiv. But obviously this solution will not work forever. Obviously, sooner or later the Russians will resume their attacks on the city of Kyiv as well. So this is the situation. Anyway, everybody is waiting for the next Monday, because according to information we have, Trump promises a major statement on Russia on Monday. Some sources are saying that new sanctions will be imposed. Some sources are saying that maybe the president of the United States of America will do completely opposite thing, something bad, let's say, regarding Ukraine. We can just think and project and to speculate on this topic. So let's wait. Anyway, let's wait. At the same time, the Russians send a message to Trump through the Secretary of State Rubio. Sergei Lavrov yesterday gave U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio a summary of quotes from Zelensky and other Ukrainian politicians who directly talk about the need to destroy the Russians. Yesterday I gave Marco Rubio a small summary of quotes from Zelensky, Shmyhal, Yermak, Podolyak, which directly talk about the need to destroy the Russians. So this is the Russian side, and this is the Russian position. Anyway, let's return back to Ukraine. Once again, air defense system is the most important thing for Ukraine, and today the Ukrainians made this show. They sent let's say military aircraft that was flying above the territory of the city of Kyiv for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation. By this, the Ukrainians are trying to tell the Western countries that if you secure the sky, we will see much more, many more planes above the territory of Ukraine, and not just military planes like F-16 or Su-24. We're going to see the civilian aircrafts, and this obviously will help Ukraine to restore its economy and probably to get additional fundings or something like this. So now let's discuss the situation on the ground. We have lots of very interesting things, and many interesting things happened during the previous 24 hours. And first, let's start with the southern part of Ukraine. Today, according to information we have, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, Belousov, inspected the progress of a combat mission by the group of forces Dnieper. The Dnieper commander reported to him on the launch of new drone control system, which made it possible to reduce drone losses and keep track of their use. So it's obviously just from media, but we believe that the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation came to the area of the group of forces Dnieper responsibility with final orders to begin another offensive or to continue offensive operation until some line. So when talking about this direction, we know that currently there are very heavy clashes in the area of the city by the name of Orekhov, and of course in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Kaminske. When talking about Kaminske, today pro-Ukrainian resources confirmed that the Russians once again managed to improve their positions, especially during the previous 24 hours, and they established control for more than probably 50 or 60% of Kaminske itself. When talking about geolocations and different videos that we got from soldiers on the ground, the Russians control around 80% and the Ukrainians control just the northern micro district. The Russians today continue offensive. They established complete FPV drone control over the settlement of Plavny, over the main supply lines from the settlement of Stepnogorsk in the southern direction. So the Russians are doing their job. They're moving slowly, but they're moving every single day 1 square kilometer for after another. Furthermore, right before we start making this video, pro-Russian resources published another video from the settlement of Plavny. So tomorrow, most likely, this contested area would be colored in Russian favor, because once again we got a geolocation that confirms this. As for the city of Orekhov, the Russians are attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine around the settlement. So there are very heavy clashes. The Russians are moving, but the Russians are not so fast in this area. So maybe the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation promised additional forces and reinforcements with the purpose to probably speed up the Russian offensive operation to get as many as possible territories before possible negotiation process between Russians and Ukrainians. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Dnipropetrovsk direction, where we see the biggest dynamic along the entire line of combat contact from the Russian side. This day we got another batch of icons. We have the biggest number of icons exactly from this area, and the most important updates are coming from the settlement of Myrne. This village is about to be taken by the Russians, is about to fall in Russian hands. The pro-Ukrainian resources on the 9th of July of 2025 published their first article, and according to this article, the Russians managed to enter the village itself and to improve their position significantly. So, for example, this is the situation by the end of the 10th of July. And by the end of the 11th of July, the Russians secured almost the entire settlement of Myrne. There are just several buildings left in the eastern part, in the southern part, and of course in the western part. But most likely tomorrow the Russians will finish the battle for the territory. Furthermore, several pro-Russian resources reported that the village was completely secured by the end of the 11th of July of 2025. During the day, we got lots of videos how Ukrainians were trying to escape, were running away from the settlement of Myrne along the tree lines to the west of the village, but the Russians control this situation, of course, and they destroyed everything that was moving along this line. So lots of episodes, lots of geolocations that confirm Ukraine attempts to escape this settlement of Myrne in the western direction, and how the Russians were trying to attack as many as possible vehicles and units of the armed forces of Ukraine. At the same time, according to information we have, the Russians began their offensive operation right after the fall of the village of Tolstoy in the direction of the settlement of Zelený Gai. The Russians managed to enter the village of Novokhatska, according to several pro-Russian resources, and the Russians are saying that they managed to get for as close as possible to the settlement of Grushovskaya. So we believe that these three settlements would be taken by the Russians without almost any resistance. To tell the truth, the villages of Novokhatska and Grushevskaya would be taken by the Russians very fast, and most likely the Ukrainians will be able to show some resistance in the area of the settlement of Zelený Gai. Probably 1 or 2 weeks the Ukrainians will be able to hold their positions, because they have Ivanovka behind, and most likely they have some supply lines that will allow them to hold their lines for as long as possible. Now let's talk about the Constantinivka direction. From this area we also got lots of icons, as you can see. There are very heavy clashes in this area, but without any changes on the ground. So the Russians are saying that Ukrainians managed to bring additional forces, and now the Russians are forced to start everything from the beginning, because the previous batch of Ukrainian reinforcement was destroyed. Probably by maybe Thursday or Wednesday of this week, the Ukrainians sent additional wave of reinforcements, and now the Russians are doing everything from the beginning through destroying Ukrainian forces, positions, equipment. Ukrainians tried to counterattack with the purpose to stabilize the situation, but it doesn't help, as we can see, because, for example, during the previous day, the Russians secured another stronghold to the northwest of the settlement of Yablunovka. This is a very important stronghold, which opens, first of all, not just the window of opportunities to secure the village of Yablunovka itself completely, but this control allows the Russians to think and to begin thinking how to move further in the northeastern direction with the purpose to attack the first settlements around the city of Constantinivka. So the control over this dense network of fortifications is very, very dangerous for Ukrainians, because if Russians are able to dig in deeper to improve their positions and to concentrate their forces, they can attack the settlements, let's say, of Stepanovka even earlier than the Russians finish the battle for Yablunovka itself. Furthermore, the Russians continue their offensive in the direction of the southeastern part of the Kliban-Byksky pocket. Currently, there are very heavy clashes already for the settlement of Katerinovka. The Russian sources are saying that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to take under control the last 3 lines in front of the settlement. So, which means that maybe even this night, between the 11th and the 12th of July of 2025, the Russians will make first attempts to attack the settlement itself. If the Russians do this, this is going to be a very big problem for those Ukrainians who are currently located in the southern part of this, let's say, Shcherbinovka pocket. We are talking about number of villages that are located along the Kryvyi Torets river and along the railways between the city of New York and the city of Constantinivka. So we are talking about this pocket. So while the Ukrainians are trying to hold their positions in this pocket, the Russians are about to finish the creation of a cauldron for them. Now let's move further. As for the Chasiv Yar direction, we have no changes. The Russians are saying that there are very heavy clashes in this area. Ukrainians use the biggest number of drones along the entire line of combat contact in comparison with any other direction. It's very difficult for the Russians, according to them, to concentrate units, because if the Russians start moving, Ukrainians destroy another vehicle immediately. The Russians at the same time are hunting for Ukrainian FPV drone positions, because they understand the less FPV drone positions the Ukrainians have, the more chances the Russians have to move further. So there is like a stable front line, and we see that the Russians probably, this is the longest battle since the beginning of the special military operation. The Russians are trying to do everything they can to establish control for the last several square kilometers of the city of Chasiv Yar, but we see that Ukrainians show fierce resistance. As for the city of Siversk, we have lots of icons. The Russians intensify their activities. It seems that the Russians are about to begin another wave of offensive operation, and most likely this time the Russians will try to establish complete control at least over the settlement by the name of Serebryanka. We see that this situation here is also very difficult. Despite the Russian attempts, a number of forces the Russians are using, we see that it's still very difficult for the armed forces of the Russian Federation to get additional square kilometers in their favor. As for the Liman direction, the Russians, according to information we have today, secured the village of Zeleny Dolina. This morning, the pro-Russian resources first published a video where they shown us how exactly the Russians were securing the territory of the settlement. Later, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation confirmed report that the Russians secured the territory of this settlement, and later we got this video where we can see how exactly the battle and the clashes for the settlement was taking place. In this video, we can see lots of episodes of how Russians were attacking attack in Ukraine positions. And in the final part of this video, we can see how a Russian soldier raised the Russian flag in the most western part of the settlement of Zhelene Dolina. Based on this video, based on the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, we adjusted this territory completely in Russian favor. Now we see that the Russians have no barriers to move further in the southwestern direction, and now the next target for the armored forces of the Russian Federation is the settlement of Shindrigolova, which would be attacked from at least two directions, from the north and the northeast. Obviously, first it will take time for the Russians to secure this territory between the settlement of Shindrigolova and, let's say, the edge positions of the armored forces of the Russian Federation, and it will take obviously 1 or 2 or even 3 weeks to finish this, but sooner or later the battle for the settlement itself will begin. As for the Kupiansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, we got just small update how the Russians began another offensive operation in the direction of Petropavlovka with 2 vehicles, and how Ukrainians were repelling another Russian attack. So just a small episode, small moment to the east of the city of Kupiansk, and based on this video, made a small correction, as you can see. As for the northern directions, we haven't received anything special. There are very heavy clashes, but neither the Ukrainians managed to secure the village of Kondratovka, nor the Russians managed to finish the battle for Yablunovka, so it's for Yunakivka. So the situation is stable. As we can see, let's wait for additional several days. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.